At 29, I sat in a studio apartment that smelled of stale coffee, watching my own funeral. On the live stream, my mother, Holly, stood on a stage bathed in golden light, weeping into a microphone. She held up a crumpled piece of paper, my supposed suicide note, and begged the donors to honor my memory. The ticker at the bottom of the screen read, $500,000 raised. The crowd applauded her grief. I wasn't dead. I was just inconvenient. And watching her monetize my erasure wasn't a tragedy. It was a business opportunity. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my laptop across the room or call them to demand an explanation. Panic is for people who still have something to lose. I had lost everything 3 years ago. Instead, I felt a strange, metallic calm settle over me, like a switch had been flipped in a circuit breaker. My mother's tears on screen were a performance, and performances require an audience. I decided right then that her audience was about to get a plot twist they hadn't paid for. I opened a new tab on my browser and booked a one-way, first-class ticket to Boston for the next morning. It cost almost everything I had left in my checking account. But investments always require capital. While the confirmation email loaded, I went to the loose floorboard under my bed. I pulled up the wood and retrieved a thick, dusty manila folder. It was labeled simply, the exit strategy. Inside was every email, every bank statement, every passive-aggressive text message I had saved since the day they kicked me out. I sat on the floor, surrounded by the physical proof of my erasure, and let the memories wash over me, not to hurt myself, but to arm myself. The official story, the one Holly was currently selling to the weeping elite of New England, was that I was troubled, that I had demons, that I had walked into the ocean one night because the pressure of being an artist was too much. The truth was far less poetic. I wasn't an artist. I was an auditor. I had discovered that my father, Richard, the celebrated architect, was cutting corners on a low-income housing project in Dorchester. He was using substandard steel that would rust within 5 years. When I confronted him, he didn't yell. He just looked at me with the cold, dead eyes of a shark and said, "You're tired, Yanni. You're imagining things." 2 days later, the locks were changed, my accounts were frozen, and the neighbors started whispering. That was the part that truly stung the whisper campaign. I found out later that my parents hadn't just kicked me out, they had been planting seeds for years, telling the country club wives that Yanni was unstable, telling the priest that Yanni had episodes, telling my sister Stephanie that Yanni was jealous of her success. They had preloaded the narrative so that when I finally disappeared, it wouldn't look like an eviction. It would look like a tragedy. For 3 years, I stayed silent. I moved to a different state, changed my number, and took a job waiting tables under a fake name. Why? Because I believed them. That was the invisible chain of survival I wore every day. When you are the scapegoat, the person upon whom the family dumps all their sins, you start to believe that your existence is the problem. You believe that disappearing is the only way to be good. I thought staying dead to them was my punishment, my penance for being ungrateful. I thought silence was safety. But looking at Holly on that stage, clutching a forgery and crying crocodile tears, I realized the truth. My silence wasn't safety. It was their currency. They were banking on my shame. They were betting everything on the fact that I would stay broken, stay hidden, and stay dead. They bet wrong. I packed one bag, a black dress I'd bought at a thrift store but tailored myself until it fit like armor, my laptop, the folder. I didn't pack a toothbrush. I wasn't planning on sleeping. I looked around the apartment one last time. It was small, ugly, and lonely. But it was real. And tomorrow, I was going to trade it for a ballroom full of lies. I landed in Boston at noon. The air smelled of salt and old money. A scent I used to associate with home, and now associated with rot. I didn't go to my parents' house. I didn't go to the cemetery to see my own empty grave. I went to a diner in Southie to meet Grace. Grace was the only person from my old life who hadn't bought the tragic suicide narrative. She was an investigative journalist for the Globe. The kind of person who looked at a press release and saw a cover-up. She was already in a booth, nursing a black coffee. A stack of papers spread out in front of her. "You look alive," she said, sliding a menu toward me. "It suits you. I feel like a ghost," I replied, sitting down. "Tell me what you found." Grace didn't waste time with pleasantries. She tapped the top document. "The Yanni Memorial Arts Foundation. Registered 3 months after your disappearance. Tax-exempt status granted immediately. Their stated mission is to provide grants for underprivileged young artists. And the reality? The reality is a shell game," Grace said, her voice low. "They raised over $500,000 last year alone. Do you know how much went to actual artists? 0? Close. $5,000. A single grant to a sculptor who happens to be the son of your father's zoning commissioner. The rest? It vanishes." She flipped the page, revealing a spreadsheet that looked more like an indictment. $300,000 paid out in consulting fees to a firm called SG Strategies. "Guess who owns SG Strategies?" "Stephanie," I whispered. "My little sister, the grieving sibling, bingo." "And another $150,000 in venue rentals paid to a holding company registered to your father. They aren't just stealing, Yanni. They are laundering money through your memory. Your death is the most profitable thing that ever happened to them." I stared at the numbers. They were clean, precise, and horrifying. I thought about Stephanie. We used to share a room. I used to braid her hair. I remembered her crying at my college graduation, saying she was going to miss me. And now, she was billing my ghost for consulting fees. This was the moment the sadness finally died. It shriveled up and blew away, replaced by a cold Zal. For years, I had viewed my expulsion as a personal tragedy. I thought my mother hated me. I thought my father was disappointed in me. I thought I was a failed daughter. But looking at this ledger, I realized I had it all wrong. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was never a person. I was an asset. And when I became a liability by threatening to expose the faulty steel, they liquidated me. This wasn't a family drama. This was a business transaction. And if they wanted to treat me like a business problem, I was going to be the worst audit they had ever faced. "This is good," I said, my voice steady. "But it's not enough. Numbers are boring. People can explain away numbers. Overhead costs, administrative fees. They'll spin it." Grace frowned. "It's fraud, Yanni. It's prison time. It's white-collar crime." I corrected. "They have lawyers. They have connections. If we drop this now, they'll settle out of court, pay a fine, and spin a story about mismanagement. I don't want them fined. I want them ruined. I need something they can't spin. I need the smoking gun." "What do you have in mind? I need to know how they did it." I said, "Not the money. The death. How do you declare a living person dead without a body? Who signed the paper? Who notarized the lie?" Grace pulled a single sheet from the bottom of the stack. A copy of a death certificate. Cause of death: drowning. Location: unspecified coastal waters. Status: presumed dead after reasonable search. And there, at the bottom, a signature I recognized. "Joseph," I said. "The family attorney. The man who came to Thanksgiving dinners. The man who gave me my first legal internship. He notarized it." Grace confirmed. And he filed the petition to release your trust fund early. I stood up. Where is he? Country club. Tea time is at 2. Perfect. I said. I need to go play around. Joseph was sitting alone in the clubhouse, nursing a scotch and looking at his phone. He looked older than I remembered. His skin papery. His suit hanging a little loose on his frame. He didn't look like a mastermind. He looked like a man waiting for the other shoe to drop. I walked up to his table and pulled out the chair opposite him. I didn't say hello. I didn't smile. I just sat down and waited. He glanced up, annoyed at the interruption, and then froze. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. Which, I suppose, he was. Hello. Joseph, I said calmly. It's been a while. You look like you've seen a dead person. Yanni, he whispered. My God. Yanni. In the flesh. Or spirit. Depends on who you ask. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thin file Grace had prepared. I slid it across the polished wood table. I know about the Cayman accounts. Joseph. I know about the kickbacks from the zoning board. Grace is very thorough. He stared at the folder, his hands trembling. He didn't open it. He didn't deny it. He just looked defeated. What do you want? He rasped. Money? I can get you money. Your trust fund. I don't want your money. I said. I want my life back. And I want the truth. How did you do it? How did you legally kill me? He took a long swallow of scotch. Your father. Richard. He came to me. Said you were unstable. Said you'd threatened suicide. Said you went for a swim and never came back. He had a police report. A missing persons file. A police report he filed? Yes. And after 7 months. With no activity on your accounts. No sightings. The law allows for a presumption of death. He asked me to expedite it. Said your mother was grieving. Said they needed closure. I helped the paperwork along. You notarized a lie. I notarized a narrative. He corrected. His voice weak. I didn't know you were alive. Yanni. I suspected. But I didn't know. Richard is persuasive. And he pays well. And the trust fund? Released to your parents as next of kin. $250,000. Gone, within a week. I leaned forward. I'm going to the gala tonight. Joseph. I'm going to walk onto that stage. And I'm going to tell everyone exactly what happened. You can be the villain in that story. The corrupt lawyer who helped them erase their daughter. Or you can be the witness who helped me expose them. He looked at me. Fear warring with something else, exhaustion. Richard will destroy me. Richard is already destroyed. I said. He just doesn't know it yet. But you kept insurance. Didn't you? You're a careful man. Joseph. You wouldn't commit a felony for Richard without a safety net. A flicker of respect crossed his eyes. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a heavy, leather-bound ledger. I call it the death file, he said softly. Just in case Richard ever tried to make me the scapegoat. He handed it to me. I opened it. Inside were emails. Dozens of them. Between my mother and father. Subject lines like timeline for disappearance and the narrative. They planned it. They scripted it. Make sure the neighbors see her crying. My mother wrote, make sure Stephanie posts about being worried. And then, I found it. A piece of stationery clipped to the back. Cream-colored. Heavy stock. The suicide note. Dearest Mom and Dad. I'm sorry I couldn't be the daughter you wanted. I read the words. Feeling a wave of nausea. It was pathetic. Melodramatic. It sounded nothing like me. But the handwriting. The handwriting was exquisite. Loops and swirls. Perfectly formed. Who wrote this? I asked. My voice cold. Look closer. Joseph said. I did. And then I saw it. The specific way the T was crossed. The flourish on the Y. It wasn't my handwriting. It was Stephanie's. My sister. The calligraphy enthusiast. The one who addressed all our Christmas cards. She hadn't just taken the consulting fees. She had forged the note that broke my grandmother's heart. She had written my death sentence with a fountain pen. This wasn't just greed. This was hate. My mother didn't mourn me. She mourned the flaw in her perfect picture. To her, I was a smudge on the lens. Erasing me wasn't murder, it was editing. And Stephanie. Stephanie was the one holding the eraser. I closed the file. Thank you. Joseph. You can go now. He stood up, looking unsteady. Are you going to the police? Eventually, I said. But first, I'm going to a party. The gala was held at the Fairmont Copley Plaza. Because of course it was. Only the best for the dead daughter. I arrived at 8. The ballroom was a sea of black tuxedos and champagne flutes. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto the heads of Boston's elite. I stood in the shadows of the coat check, watching them. They looked so comfortable, so safe. They thought they were attending a charity event. They didn't know they were attending an execution. On the stage, a giant portrait of me, black and white. Soft focus. Looking tragic, beamed down at the crowd. My mother, Holly, was at the podium. She looked stunning in midnight blue velvet, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. 10 years. She choked out, her voice amplified by the speakers. 10 years since our beautiful Yanni left us. 10 years of silence. But tonight we turn that silence into hope. The crowd murmured sympathetically. Richard stood beside her, looking stoic and brave, his hand resting supportively on her shoulder. Stephanie was to her left, clutching a tissue, looking delicate and devastated. It was a perfect tableau, a masterpiece of performance art. I signaled the doorman. He looked at my invitation, a press pass Grace had forged, and then at my dress. I wasn't wearing black. I wasn't wearing white. I was wearing red, blood red. A structured, architectural gown that looked like a wound against the monochrome crowd. It was loud. It was alive. It was a scream in a library. I pushed open the double doors. The sound of my heels on the marble floor cut through the hush of the room. Click, click, click. Heads turned. At first, just a few. Then a ripple. Then a wave. The murmurs stopped. The silence spread from the back of the room to the front, like a tide going out before a tsunami. I kept walking. I didn't look at the guests. I looked straight at the stage. Stephanie saw me first. Her eyes went wide. She dropped her champagne flute. It shattered on the stage, the sound exploding in the quiet room. Crash. Holly looked up, annoyed at the interruption of her monologue. She squinted into the lights, and then she saw me. Her hand flew to her throat. She stepped back, stumbling in her heels. She grabbed the podium for support, her knuckles turning white. Richard just froze. He looked like a statue of a man realizing he was made of sand. I walked right up the center aisle. People parted for me, confused, terrified. Was I a ghost? An impersonator? A hallucination? I reached the stairs to the stage. I climbed them slowly. 1, 2, 3. I stood next to my mother. Up close. I could see the heavy makeup filling the cracks of her fear. I could smell her expensive perfume. The same scent she wore the day she kicked me out. She trembled. Yanni? She whispered, the microphone picking up the sound, broadcasting her terror to 500 people. But You're dead? I finished for her. My voice was calm, clear, and cold. I know. I read the obituary. It was beautifully written. I turned to the audience. 500 faces staring back at me in shock. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Good evening. I said, I'm the ghost. And I'm afraid I have some corrections to make to the program. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Security guards hovered at the edges of the stage. Unsure of what to do. I looked confident. I looked like I belonged there. And in their world, confidence is the ultimate credential. No one moved to stop me. I gently took the microphone from my mother's trembling hand. Her fingers were stiff, locked around it like a lifeline. I peeled them off, one by one. She didn't fight me. She was paralyzed. My mother was just about to read you a letter, I said, holding up the piece of paper she had dropped on the podium. My suicide note. It's very moving. Dearest Mom and Dad, I'm sorry I couldn't be the daughter you wanted. Heartbreaking, isn't it? I looked at Stephanie. She was shaking her head slightly, mouthing no. 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 The only problem, I continued, is that I didn't write it. I've never written a suicide note in my life, but I do recognize the handwriting. I turned to Stephanie. It's lovely calligraphy. Steph, you always did have the best penmanship in the family. Did you practice? Or did it just flow out of you while you were cashing the checks? The crowd gasped. A collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the room. Lies! Richard suddenly roared. Snapping out of his stupor, he lunged toward me. She's sick. She's mentally ill. Get her off the stage. Sit down. Richard. Joseph's voice boomed from the front row. He stood up, looking tired but resolved. Next to him were 2 police officers. Let her speak. Richard froze. He looked at his attorney, his fixer, and saw the betrayal in his eyes. He sank back, defeated. I looked up at the projection booth. Grace? If you would. The giant, tragic portrait of my face dissolved. In its place, a spreadsheet appeared. Bank transfers. This is the financial record of the Yanni Memorial Arts Foundation, I narrated, pointing to the screen. $500,000 raised last year. $5,000 given to artists. $495,000 paid to SG Strategies and Richard Architects Holdings. The screen changed again. Emails. And this, I said, is an email from my mother to my father, dated 3 months before my alleged death. Subject, Operation, Erase Yanni. We need to start the rumors now. She wrote, tell the neighbors she's off her meds. Make sure the narrative is set before we file the report. I looked at my mother. She was weeping now. Ugly, silent sobs. Not for me. For herself. For the image she had spent 60 years building. Now crumbling into dust on a projector screen. You didn't mourn me, I said to her, my voice dropping to a whisper that echoed in the silent hall. You edited me. You didn't like the daughter you had. So you wrote a new one. A dead one. A perfect, a tragic martyr who could make you money and get you sympathy. I dropped the fake suicide note on the floor, but I'm not a character in your story anymore. Mom, I'm the author. And this is the final chapter. I looked at the crowd one last time. Enjoy the gala. I hear the shrimp is excellent. I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a deafening thud. Feedback screeched through the speakers. I walked off the stage, past my shattered family, past the stunned donors, and out the back doors. I didn't run. I walked. The snow melted early that year. By April, the city was gray and wet, washing away the salt and the grime of winter. I watched it from the window of my new office. It wasn't a corner office in a skyscraper. It was a storefront in Jamaica Plain, sandwiched between a bakery and a laundromat. The sign on the door read, "The Phoenix Legal Aid Center." The fallout had been total. Richard and Holly were indicted for insurance fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. They pleaded guilty to avoid a public trial that would have aired even more dirty laundry. They were currently serving 5 years in minimum security. They lost the house, the cars, the reputation. They were bankrupt in every sense of the word. Stephanie was socially exiled. She moved to Ohio, changed her name, and was working as a receptionist. She sent me a letter once, asking for money. I returned it unopened. I reclaimed my trust fund $250,000 plus the seized assets from the sham charity. It was a lot of money, enough to disappear to an island and never work again. But I didn't want to disappear. I was done disappearing. I used the money to buy this building. I hired Joseph, who lost his license, but knew where all the bodies were buried in this town, as a paralegal. We specialized in one thing: financial abuse. We helped wives whose husbands hid assets. We helped children whose parents stole their identity. We helped the scapegoats. I stood on the sidewalk, looking at the sign, "The Phoenix," rising from the ashes. It was a cliché. Maybe. But clichés are clichés because they're true. I didn't keep the blood money. I planted it. I put it into the ground. Into this work. Into the people who came through that door, looking for a way out. I took the bricks they threw at me, and I built a house they can't enter. If you believe in fighting for the truth, no matter the cost, hit that like button and share this story. You never know who needs to hear that. They aren't crazy, they're just being erased. See you in the next one.